Morning, everyone. Welcome. We're just going to be taking a few minutes to let everyone jump on, but we do got lots of content to cover today, so we'll be kicking off fairly quickly. And you'll probably hear me say that one or two more times as new people jump on, so just bear with me. Morning, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll be kicking off in a minute or two, so just hang tight, and we'll be getting started quite shortly. Morning, everyone. For those of you just jumping on, we'll just be a few minutes to kick off, probably about one more minute, realistically. Just waiting for a few other people to jump onto the session. Great to have you here, and we'll be getting kicked off shortly. And for those of you who've heard me say that 4 times already, apologies. Probably be maybe the second last time. Or actually, you know what? Let's make it the last. So I might just get started because, yeah, as mentioned, there's lots of content to cover today. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a moment just to say hello to everyone so you can see our faces. My name is Eric, and this is Anand. You can see below. He's our guest speaker today. So he'll be getting involved very shortly. But a few things to cover from my end first. So just to make sure you're in the right spot, this is a webinar on the topic of building customer-centric teams, which is a topic very close to our hearts and hopefully to yours as well. And I guess just a few call outs. One, if you were a regular at some of our webinars last year, I think we did 15 or so, we're sorry we were gone so long. We didn't intend to. My only excuse is that we've been super busy building out new courses, new programs, and helping new clients. And this is a big one for us. So we're super excited to be here. Also, this is a good opportunity to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered today and pay respect to their elders, past, present, and future. So this session, myself and Anand, we're each going to have sort of some content we're going to focus on, but we may be interrupting each other with questions, etc. It's not because we hate each other and don't want to hear them talk. It's just because, yeah, we're genuinely interested in what they have to say, and our pieces do fit together quite well. And if I sound a bit manic at any point on the session, it's because, yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to go through, and I want to do it all in time and give some time for questions at the end. So speaking of questions, got just a bit of housekeeping stuff. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a chat function. There's already a few messages in there now. So feel free to throw your name down there, your job role, and the company you work for. A lot of the time that will turn into a bit of a networking thing at the bottom of the chat. So by all means do that, share LinkedIn profiles, whatever you want to do as you go through that. And then there's also a Q&A function that you'll see as well. So that is for me and Anand. So any questions that you have at any point during the webinar, feel free to chuck those in there, and then we will get to them at the end, assuming that we can stick to message and not go long with our pieces of the actual session. So with that time constraint in mind, I will get kicked off with content quite quickly now. So I'm just going to share screen again. Okay. So I'm just having a bit of an issue with changing the page. There we go. Okay, so before we get kicked off into anything, I just wanted to cover who we are. So I work for Academy XI. In a nutshell, we train teams, we deliver programs in the areas of digital, data, design, customer centricity. Some of you may know us really well. Some of you may never have heard of us before at all. And it was more the content of this webinar that's got you interested. Either way, welcome. I'm really happy to have you. This webinar is focused on customer centricity. It's a major focus of ours. We have lots of different offerings in that area, and they range from one-day courses for frontline teams right up to organization-wide transformation programs. So today's session focuses more on building customer-centric teams, so more team level, but we will talk a little bit about sort of the larger picture at organization level as well. Some of the companies that we've partnered with, won't really go into too much detail on that. And then this is kind of the sort of backbone of what we'll be talking about today. So I want to go into it in a little bit of detail. So customer centricity is a confusing term because people use it to describe different things. So if you talk to one person about it, they're going to they've got something different in their head than other people do. So when we talk about it, just at very high level, it's just putting humans, users, staff, customers at the heart of your decision-making process at a business at all levels of that business. So when we talk about those levels, we talk about these that you're looking at in front of you now. And these three we'll be covering today. We'll mainly focus on 1 and 2. Number 3 is actually going to be a follow-up webinar that we have that's more on the org structure, service design piece of this puzzle. So I'll just go through them very briefly. So frontline mindsets and tools, to us, this means, literally the mindsets and tools that your frontline customer-facing staff can adopt and use on a day-to-day basis to be more customer-centric in their personal practice, the way they do their jobs. So you'll see the word personal just beside that for that reason. Then team level systems, which is what Anand is going to be focused on today. And he is a customer service team lead with a ton of experience. He'll be telling some in the trenches stories around how he has shifted team level systems to be more customer centric in the past. And we describe that as more of a structural piece. So there's a bit more sort of in the back end structural design of your team and the systems that they use and they live inside of. And then organizational services, processes, technologies also sits within that structural space. So moving on. I'll begin with talking about the frontline mindsets and tools. So before I do, I just wanted to pose a question to the group, which you can answer in chat or just really it's a thought starter more than anything else. So is it possible to be personally customer-centric, so the term I just used, in an organization that is not structurally customer-centric? So just kind of let that, I know it's new terminology in some ways, but just let it sink in for a moment, and I'll give you sort of our answer for this, which is yes. So the example that I usually use is kind of for this, put yourself into the shoes of yourself as a customer, so your shoes really, but outside of work. So have you ever tried to engage with a business to potentially buy something? You've gone to their website, you just couldn't find what you were looking for on the website. It wasn't built in a user-friendly way. You're getting frustrated. You probably gave them a call. You got onto the, pre-recorded message phone merry-go-round. You're just getting super annoyed. At the very last minute, you're about to give up, and you do get someone on the phone. And that person just gets it. They understand your frustrations. They commiserate. They move pretty quickly into just trying to understand what you're trying to do. And they've got the answers. They solve them for you. And you walk away probably happier, more sort of impressed than you would have been if you'd just been able to solve the problem easily on the website. So that is an example of an employee that you've dealt with who was being personally customer-centric inside a company that was not built out in a customer-centric way from a team-level system or org structure, like customer journey perspective. So it can definitely be done, which means that it can be tackled without having to go to those larger levels. I mean, ideally, you do all 3 of these things, but you can just tackle number 1 by itself, and you can affect change very quickly within your staff or yourself, depending on who you are. And the next little bit of what I'll talk about are some the mindsets and tools that we use when we do training in this space to help you achieve those goals. So
just to jump in there, Eric,
yeah, sure.
I think that's a really good example where what's in it for me as the customer service advisor is a good question. And I think that if you do that well, I'm sure you'll be more successful in the outcomes you're creating.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. It's interesting because there will be people here today who are customer service team leads and probably frontline customer facing staff as well. A lot of people who will have started at line level and then gone up to a management position. And so you know, a lot of this stuff you understand intrinsically, but it is easy, like I've done it, where you kind of move up in your career, you get into a management role, and it is easy to lose sight of what you used to do in the actual like day in, day out. It's a grind, you know, like let's face it. And so being able to put yourself back in not only your customer's shoes, but your staff's shoes as well is really key, and to get a feel for what can be done and how easy it is to do. So coming back to that sort of frontline mindsets and tools, what are they? What can we give to frontline staff to help them be more personally customer centric? So these are drawn from a one-day course on this topic that we run as Academy XI. Olivia, my colleague, will be putting an info pack for that into the chat, which you can download if you're interested. I'm going to be running through all this quite quickly, so it'll go fast, but you can refer back to that if you want to know more. So the way we teach these sort of mindsets and tools is through scenarios. It's a recurring theme for us. So a scenario that the people taking the course in this case, or your staff, will encounter in their everyday jobs. So the scenario number one, dealing with vulnerable customers and colleagues. So happens to everyone. You run up on a position where you're speaking to someone through whatever channel it happens to be, and they're upset. Angry or upset are the most common two. So how do you as a frontline staff member sort of handle that? Now there are whole sort of worlds that Anand is probably better, or sort of has probably done, building out scripts, step-by-step processes to do this. The problem with that from a customer centricity perspective doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it is hard to be customer centric when you're following a set of rules that you didn't create. So what we focus on more is going back to enabling your staff to understand how they're dealing with customers, and to sort of let them become the champion of their own workflow as they go through dealing with a vulnerable customer. So I'm not going to go into each of these in detail. Some of them will be fairly obvious. So understanding your biases, you know, gauging the communication style of the person you're talking to. I will just quickly for this one call out the peak end rule, because it's maybe a little bit less known. So we have a CX strategy course, a customer experience strategy course. This is pulled from. So it's the idea that in a customer journey, so the journey a customer takes with you, they don't necessarily remember the whole thing. What they do remember is either the most positive or most negative event that they encounter during the customer journey they take with you as a company, and the end. So two things, either the best or the worst moment and the end. So if you know that, like you can't always nail every piece of a customer journey. It's just not always possible. But if you have that information, or if your staff does, then they can focus on those areas that are going to leave the most memorable impression, which will lead to, more likely to get positive reviews, word of mouth, all of those things are positively affected. I'll be moving through this quickly, as I mentioned, just because we've got lots to go through. So scenario 2 that we often find that's good to focus on is understanding your customers or colleagues better. Colleagues is a good call, because it's not always just frontline staff. So this is a scenario where you as a frontline staff member or your team, they're dealing with not one, but a group of customers, a sequence of customers, and they feel like they don't really quite understand something that's going on with them. There's some problem they're facing that is probably happening earlier in the customer journey, and then they get to you and there's something going on and you don't really understand it. So how do you find out? It's a bit of a research piece, really. It's enabling your staff to dig a little deeper, do a bit of research, and find out what's actually going on with these people. So again, a couple of tools that we teach that people can use. I'm going to focus on customer journey maps. because I've already mentioned customer journeys a few times. Like, this is a tool, we're a human-centered design school, if that's an area you're aware of. It's gaining traction inside organizations at massive scale. Customer journey maps is one of the core tools, or artifacts, as they're called, that user experience designers, CX strategists, service designers use, but we teach it a lot to frontline teams as well, because it's super useful. Because if you have a customer's run into you halfway through the process, a customer journey, and they're not happy, and you don't know what they actually did to get to you, there's no way you're going to know or have an idea of what that problem actually is. If you don't know what it is, you can't solve it. So empowering someone to look back through the customer journey and to understand what that looks like, I think, is really valuable. It also helps to break down silos, because it gives your staff a better understanding of what else is going on and what other customers are actually dealing with before and after they get to your piece. So that's scenario 2. Scenario 3, and you can kind of view these as a bit of a flow. So say you, as a frontline staff or your team, dealt with, engaged with a vulnerable customer. They felt like they didn't really understand quite what the problem was they were facing. So they did a bit of research, they found out, and now they need to solve that problem. So that can be quite daunting if you're, one little piece in a big, large puzzle. So there's some tools that we use and teach to help people to solve those problems. Again, I'll focus on one. I think problem statements here is the one that I would say is, if you want to bring one thing in, super valuable skill to teach. So you may have understood the problem in your own head, what the customer is facing, but can you communicate it to the other staff? Or is it really completely fleshed out in your own head? Using a problem statement is just a really good tool for what is the underlying problem, not the symptom, because if you solve a symptom, that's good, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem the customer is facing, and it's just going to continue to happen. So problem statements are great for finding out what the actual core issue is that a customer is facing, and then you can start to move into the solving it phase. Number 4, so this is in the course that we teach, is an interesting piece, but I think really, really important. Training is a really good opportunity to address elephants inside rooms. Things like looking at KPIs, which Anand will touch on. For me, just very briefly talk around analyzing constraints. So a lot of the time, frontline staff, they want to solve, 99% of frontline staff want to solve problems for customers, but they'll often get told by the company, you can't do this. And there's nothing more demoralizing than being told that without a reason specifically, because you just know the company doesn't care. Often there is a reason why you can't do something, but it's buried inside back-end processes, policy, royal commission, financial stuff. But I'd really advise you to take the time to tell staff why they can't do something, because then they can, one, start to look for either a solve or finding a win-win, and they'll understand why they can't do something. And they won't just be mad and think the company doesn't care about my customers or me, and they're not enabling me to make these changes. So I think that's really big. This one I won't touch on too much. It's really important, but I'm not an expert in this space. Our facilitators more focused on this, but specifically trying to remove stressors from the workplace. It's often like a straw that broke the camel's back scenario, where one small thing gets added to your already very full workload. And it's just that thing you don't have an answer for, and it just kills you. And it's so stressful. It happens to me all the time. And I just have to try to find ways, 1, to recognize those signs, 2, to locate the source of them, and then 3, to remove or minimize that. So, there's various ways to do that. We have a few that we touch on in the course we run, but various things. But I think it's just, more and more, especially in working from home scenarios, self-care is a huge piece of the puzzle. If your staff are super stressed out, they're not going to enjoy their jobs, massive churn, and they won't do a great job for customers either, because they're just not going to be in the right headspace. So really recommend focusing on that. Overall benefits to this, there's a ton of benefits. I'm sure they're fairly obvious to you guys. For time constraints, I'm just not going to go into them in detail. But it really can form, you could do this stuff tomorrow, it can happen apart from the other 2 pieces, and it can also act as follow-ons to them, and it can start that grassroots culture shift that you need to shift organization at a larger level. I'm just about on my time, which is great. So just wanted to reframe the 3 levels. We're now going to move into team level systems, which is more of a structural piece. And to talk to that and tell a few stories from the trenches, I'm going to get Anand to jump on.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for that overview as well. Yeah, let's just jump in. I'll sort of love to share with you some stories, but briefly, I enjoy building teams using some of these principles. I didn't wake up with them. There's a lot of unlearning and figuring out things that didn't work personally in my own leadership journey. But what I love doing is building teams, and I'd love to share some stories with that today. I used to work across a range of industries. I started in banking, and then I worked in education for some time, and most recently with Open Universities Australia. I'm going to share some of the story is around what we did there with an awesome team. And at the moment, I'm a consultant and I do work across a number of clients. Thanks, Eric. We can just jump in. When we were framing this, I think this is a good place to start. You know, we have some common challenges. I'm sure you have a lot of good ideas, but sometimes the busyness of how we do things and our challenges, our pressures, our targets, etc., don't enable this. So we'll start there. And the story I'm going to tell you is a little bit of what we did at Open Universities. I'll now tell you a little bit about Open Universities. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
Yeah, so Open Universities is essentially a higher education marketplace and connects up students who are looking to study basically undergrad and postgrad courses with top universities here in Australia. And so that's what OUA does. And within OUA, there's a team called the Student Advisory Team responsible for sales and service. And the sales and service are bundled together. It's around 80 FTE student advisors or agents. And they're either on the phone and messaging across, web chat to WhatsApp and so on, and Apple messaging. And so this team really deals with students and customers day in and day out. So this is a bit of their story and a bit of how we work there. Thanks, Eric. Well, here, I've captured challenges in 3 areas. The first one is in terms of staff. And Eric, your last slide there, or the 5th scenario, was around stress. That's a key aspect, I don't know about you, but if I'm stressed, I'm no fun at all. And that works at all levels, including for our staff. And especially if frontline staff are not happy, it's not a great place. So what was it? About 5 years ago, we had high staff attrition, about 40%. It's not unusual in a contact center environment. But what that meant is constantly having to hire new people, train them, and a leakage of knowledge. And how to build that knowledge base was a challenge. So that's from a staff standpoint. The second is from a customer standpoint. If you look at it there, we did quite well at that time, but I would say there was a lot of improvement possible still, a bit of average service. But the key thing was the relationship was most transactional. We were not able to really build long-term relationships of value that helped the students and customers actually complete their studies. And a lot of time with complaints. And as a result, I think a lot of you are team leaders or managing teams. It's not a lot of fun to be chasing complaints all the time and working on that end of the spectrum, rather than looking at what can you do for your customers. But so that was it. So in terms of customers, we could have done better. And finally, this was all translating into the overall performance. At a individual level, while we had about 100 FT at the time, less than 20% were actually hitting their target. So that wasn't great. And the second is the company at that time was having nearly 5 years of decline in new student growth. So some of the problems with staff and customers were obviously not creating the right kind of outcomes, and there was a lot of pressure in terms of the results. So I want to take it to the next level to say, what are some of the underlying causes? And as we talk about some of the things that we did, I'd like to share with you some stories about that. But first, you'd come across this wonderful saying from Einstein, right? Sounds good, but we sometimes do the same things again and again, and obviously we don't see different results. So that's where we had to next move in to design what I call a customer-centric kind of system. And the elements of that system were about these three areas. One was in terms of saying, okay, how do we work and collaborate? If we could improve that and make that better, we'd become more customer-centric. The second one was around people experience, happy people, happy customers in a simplistic way. And the third one was, in terms of that brand with customers and students, we wanted to become what we call trusted advisors. So those were the levers. We wanted to improve how we worked, how our people operated and how they felt supported, and then that translating into a better customer-centric and customer experience. So I'm going to jump into that story now in terms of how we designed this. This wasn't a straight line, and it won't be. And I'll start first with leadership. 6 key subsystems I'm going to talk about today. When I was leading the team in the early stages, I was really frustrated with certain aspects. I'd walk on the floor, come back after a meeting, look at the dashboards and see we were red in terms of abandon rate, we were red in terms of service times and so on. And I would turn at the first team leader I could find and say, what's going on? What's really happening? Now, so my style of leadership was no fun at all for them. It was quite directive, it was autocratic, and I thought I needed to have all the answers. In this journey, the first piece was to change that leadership style. And that feeds very well into some of the other aspects I'm going to talk about. But essentially, I had to start listening more. I had to start working out what was it that was causing those problems and supporting people. And that style of leadership is what we call more of a servant leadership style or an empowering style. That had to translate now to the next level because all the team leaders themselves in the team needed to work out how they could change their own leadership style. And we did that quite well and quite successfully. The second aspect I'm going to talk about is salary and rewards. And Eric, you referred to it briefly. We had 5 years ago a pretty low base salary and a very high commission structure. So those that did well really nearly earned more than their base salary in commissions. Problem though was, remember I told you earlier that not many were actually hitting targets. Less than 20% were hitting targets, so less than 20% were getting these commissions. And so the problem was with this that, I don't know about you, when you call a customer in any organization, say with a telecom company, and if they're more interested in the commission, they're not likely to be listening to you really well. And so we realized that the commissions and the way we paid was actually creating a problem. So we changed that strategy and actually started realizing we paid people more of a base salary. Now, why would you pay people more? Only when the job actually expands and you do more and you add more value. So over time, we managed to do that and actually got rid of commissions. And the key element now is we changed the game. So in the past, the top 10 advisors would be eligible to go out to a celebration with the leadership team. And that was fantastic. But each one really focused on being like an Usain Bolt, who can run faster. Wasn't a team game. So we realized this and then shifted the game. And one key aspect here was, how did we measure success? And we moved from an individual game to a team game. Have you watched a good footy team really doing well, or a basketball team? What's the scoreboard? Are there 10 different scoreboards per person in the team? No, there's one, right? So the way we measured now success was based on what we called team KPIs. Right? So, which means that there are two things: that the team starts getting together to maximize the team outcome. I'll share with you a story of an individual a little later, but it meant a change in not getting the commissions you got the way you did, but as you succeeded now as a team as a whole and as a company as a whole, actually everybody started winning, and the rewards actually didn't go down to the people who were doing well. So that was about shifting the game there of setting team KPIs. A lot of this was, I know, Eric, you've done some webinars in the past about agile ways of working, and that's been well received. Now, the team, what does this look like every day for the team? So there are 7 teams in the center, and each team has a team board, and they look at, they have some team targets and goals. But what do? They come at the start of every shift and they have a conversation. That's called a daily team huddle. They look at, hey, what did we do well yesterday? And, did we have any challenges? Did we hear some successes? They celebrate that. Who did really well? And what did we learn? What could we do better today? They create that plan. In that plan, the team decides, okay, let's decide what positions we're playing on the team, right? So they have the ownership now in choosing what activities they perform. Okay, I want to jump on outbound today, and you know what? And there's a conversation there that if an individual says, I want to do X, I want to jump on messaging, and they're not the right person, or they're not expecting demand and a volume of chats today, then they decide and say, they challenge each other, and that's the best part. There's a level of trust that's built up, and they hold each other accountable. And so that's an example. Through the day, they share information with each other. If they have a problem, they including while working from home last year and still continue a little bit this year, on channels like Slack, on messaging, they're able to ask each other for help and then say, okay, here's somebody else in the team that's best suited to solve this problem for this customer. I'm going to pass you on to that customer, that student advisor. So that's another example. And at the end of the week, the team gets together, looks at their results for the week and say, okay, what went well? Let's celebrate that. What didn't go well? Let's identify that, because we can change that and we'll make changes. And then, they make a plan to say, okay, next week, how do we look at doing something better? So this is a really important way of creating conversations, communication, visualizing the results. And as a result, the team feels a lot more that it controls and owns what it can deliver. IT systems also need to be looked at, because if we give our frontline staff the best tools, then they succeed. But the story here I want to tell you is, we had one of the smartest people in the team as being a subject matter expert managing leads. And in terms of this person's role was to manage the dialer and the lists in the dialer so that the right teams could call the right customers at the right time. And it was very critical because, yeah, the quicker we responded to the right customers, we'd get a better result. However, this was the problem. We had some good systems, but we hadn't implemented it that well. And as a result, this individual, who was one of the smartest person, was doing a very manual job, creating these lists. And pretty much, if she went on leave, we had a problem. Sometimes even going to the bathroom in a critical time was a challenge. And that's not a way to create, great results and support for your customers. We realized this and decided, okay, we need to change this. And it's part of one of these review conversations, or we call them retros. We said, hey, what if we could improve this and implement a better system? Got all the team together. We built what's called an RFP, created a tender. That was done in 4 weeks. We selected a vendor, the team was involved, and in 4 weeks we implemented. And that was outstanding because in a way, we just turned it on its head, where the problems we had and the team members that had these problems at every level, at the agent level, at the team leader level, at the subject matter level, and at the IT, team level as well. We looked at all those problems, turned it around, and got a fantastic solution in record time. And the agile way of working that I talked about, we managed to use that to work to collaborate with the vendor of the new solution. And they believed as well this was one of the best implementations they'd ever done because of the kind of communication and involvement of the team at every level. So the last subsystem I'm going to talk about is what we called role crafting. Now, this is another level, taking it to another level. And I'll give you an example of something we created there called guilds. Now, guilds are like hobby groups, So people in the team do a particular role because we've chosen them, they've applied for that role, they do that role, they've been trained to do it well. But most of us, I don't know about you, I have a number of interests other than the specific job I'm doing. And that's true, we found for the team as well, that some of the team had a specific interest in marketing, some had an interest in systems. We created these hobby groups and gave them time to get together and find solutions to problems that they were interested in solving. And wow, I can tell you that new advisors who joined the team last year, they learned the job, they learned the skill set, and they contributed coming with a fresh pair of eyes because we had these guilds in such amazing ways that it helped improve the outcomes in terms of the customer service and the NPS and all these ratings, because they were really able to bring their talents and gifts to the team. So this is some of the things we did. And in the heart of this, in the middle, is we started seeing students being happier and happier. And we measured that in some real ways. And I'll talk to you about some of the metrics and the results shortly. But the first thing I want to tell you is, in terms of role crafting, here are 3 examples. Yeah, the first one, you can jump to the next slide, Eric.
Yep. Actually, I was just going to jump in really quickly on that.
Yeah.
One thing that we talk about a lot is the idea of reinforcing or sort of bringing the idea into frontline staff that they are the subject matter expert when it comes to customers, and that they have knowledge that they've acquired through their everyday job that other people don't have. And so it's a way to make them feel more valuable to the organization as a whole, because sometimes you have that feeling of, oh, I'm just a low-level employee. Nobody, I don't have anything valuable to provide. Either you have a bit of self-doubt around that, or you think that the rest of the company sees you that way. And so for us, it's really big to go, no. you're the subject, you're the SME when it comes to customer. And so we need to pull you, like we're going to pull you into working groups if you're interested, and we want your opinion so that we can build out organizational systems and things like that, that otherwise we would get this wrong without you. So I think that's a really good call out.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, so here are some examples of outcomes that were created from a team basis that helped the team to become more customer-centric. The first one on the left there is Dylan. Dylan is the example of someone who's always been a top performer. He's from day one. In the old system with individual targets, he was there. And there was a pilot for the first team that was created as part of the transformation we did there. When he joined that team, Dylan had to unlearn what it meant to be a super individual performer to then become a customer-centric team player. And having done that really well today, Dylan is really much happier. He doesn't have the pressure he puts on himself, and he gets to do what he enjoys most within the team, and the team decides to handball that work to him. And he has become such a fantastic guide and coach to others in the team about his skills and sharing of his skills and knowledge. Okay, so that's the magic that Dylan is creating now in the team. On the right, there is Maria. Now, Maria is a very diligent person, always, and she, customer centricity is kind of in her. That example you shared, Eric, earlier, the question you asked, can you be personally customer centric? Maria's absolutely answers that question. The problem, though, was over the years, initially, before we started this journey to redesign the system, Maria was always looked at sometimes as a problem. It took too long to help customers, so the AHT on those calls was too long. And in terms of some of the sales or service outcomes, we wanted more out of that. What's happened in this new system and the way the team is operating today is Maria is handballed all the most challenging service issues that students have. A postgraduate student, with something happened and somewhere in the system something went wrong, Maria is able to work through, connect with everybody across the organization, whether it's the university or internally at OUA, and make sure she chases up to get that solution. And so what's happened is the service orientation, which was looked at as a problem previously under a different lens, and now has become an asset to the team. And Maria now shares knowledge with others about these complex queries and is also involved in guilds to help smoothen the cross-functional challenges across systems and processes, and finds those answers and continues to do an outstanding job. The third person there at the bottom is Pat. Now, Pat's story is this. Pat has been with OUA for a long time, extremely diligent, extremely self-managed. But Pat needs systems and processes to work well. And when he's in the flow, he needs to have things really working well. And on the day we implemented the new telephony system, because in the past, other systems we've done, often, I'm sure when you launch a new CRM or so on, there are some teething troubles. So we had our fair share of teething troubles in the past. But when we launched our telephony system, which Pat was involved in, providing input and others from his team to test the system, I walked into him on the floor that afternoon after we went live and said, Pat, how's it going? How's the new system? And he said to me, what system? Because it had been that smooth. And he continues to adapt, evolve, and as an organization as a whole, OUA does a great job in trying to make sure that everyone in the front end that is the expert today is able to contribute in the best way possible, not just in their role, but making a wider difference to then create that customer-centric experience. Okay, just move to the I'm just wrapping up here and going to share with you some of the outcomes that were created because of the redesign and this transformation. Like I said, it wasn't a straight line. There were many hits and misses. We did this with a experimentation mindset. Things that worked well, we did more of, and things that didn't work well, we stopped doing. The staff turnover, which was 40+%, currently is under 10%. That's healthy because for some people, for whatever reason, they've got to find another job, but they're leaving for the right reasons and not for the wrong reasons. That's one huge success. And, we're not spending a lot of, at OUA, they're not spending a lot of time training and hiring as much as they did in the past. Okay, the next one is in terms of,
All right.
Here the customer, right? Sorry, this is the staff NPS. This is the engagement score. It was negative 5 years ago, and today it's positive. And what I want to share with you is the frontline staff are amongst the highest engaged across any business segment or department at OUA today. And that's amazing because they're making a difference. Okay, now how is this translating to the customer? Eric, we can jump in. Next slide. Yeah, so at a staff productivity level, it's twice as productive as it was in 5 years, right? And in terms of the customer NPS, just go to the next slide, Eric. Yeah, I don't have a slide here, I just realized on NPS, but the customer NPS is about +40. And there's a student happiness score that is around every transaction. That ranges between 90 to 95 on average. And so the outcome to the business now is OUA moved around from a 5-year decline to it's 3.5 years and is still counting of quarter-on-quarter new student growth. So I'll just do the summary slide of key takeaways. You just jump to that straight, Eric. To summarize, I would like to say, yes, there's some question on the chat. I'll just answer it shortly. But just to summarize, there are 3 things in the middle, I think, I would encourage you to think about impacting. How can you impact the employee experience? And the things on the left are some of the levers, and I shared you some examples, right? The leadership style, rewards, ID systems, crafting the roles. The moment you do that, the outcome is you'll see that staff engagement goes up, and you retain some of your good staff. And by doing that, you can accelerate the next lever, which is customer experience, right? And the moment the staff are able to become more customer-centric, and that's why I think, working at all levels, whether it's at an individual level, at a team level, or an organization level, the moment you do that, you can measure that in terms of, how is the customer experience actually improving? And through NPS and CSAT and customer retention, those are some metrics that will help you look at whether you're heading in the right direction there. And I can't stress, working out ways on how to collaborate better, agile, human-centered design thinking, all the stuff that, we're trying to talk about today that Eric has already shared. The moment you start doing that, you'll start building a culture of continuous improvement, and that will drive innovation, business, and growth. So those outcomes on the right are connected. And in my experience, I think I have a bias. I believe that the employee experience drives the customer experience, and the more you do to improve that, you'll see better results. So that's kind of what I want to share just now. There's some questions there which I'd love to get into and provide a little more input about, Eric.
Yep, we'll just, I've got a little bit of piece to go through, and then we will jump into questions as soon as we possibly can. So I'll just kind of touch very briefly on number 3, the organizational services, processes, and technologies. Again, this will be the topic of our next webinar coming up in about a month or so. So this will be a bit of a teaser, really, but just wanted to talk about it briefly because it is an important piece of this puzzle. So when we say organizational services, processes, technologies, really what we need there is customer journey redesign, the back-end processes needed to service those journeys, and the technology suite that you need to make all of that happen. So Anand has touched on some of that at team level. That sometimes will be happening at organizational level as well. Like you can either have quite sort of small, discrete customer journeys, or you can have large overarching ones. And the bigger you go, the trickier it gets, the more internal buy-in at org level you need to be able to make those changes. So, tackling the big piece at the very beginning will work and can work if you have org buy-in, but there's ways to do it sort of in smaller amounts as well. The tool that we use is one of the things that we teach, and we do service design, project delivery as well. It's the discipline of service design. Some of you may have heard of it. It's gaining traction inside organizations very, very quickly. And they basically, it's a role, so it's an individual and a discipline. And what they do is choreograph the customer journeys, the back-end processes, and the supporting technologies used to create value for stakeholders and to turn your organization into a customer-centric one at a structural level. So pieces of it can be used at that team level, systems level, and then also at the larger org process design level as well. So that's the tool that we use to affect that change. Then I'll very quickly talk about bringing all of this together. So there are 3 levels there. There's obviously a lot in each one of them. It can be challenging to try and think of it all together, but if possible, the programs that we run, the larger transformation programs that we run actually seek to address all 3 of those levels at the same time. And it's done for one specific reason, that you gain that organizational impetus to change culture at all levels, and that feeling that every single person inside a company is actually working together towards a common goal, which to me is the thing that creates grassroots culture shift better than anything else. When you're all doing something together and seeing the results of that, and everyone feels like they've been engaged and have contributed to it. I'm not going to go into this much today. This will be the subject of the next webinar, but we run customer-centric transformation programs for clients, as we call them. You can take of this what you will. The concept that we bring to the table and that we work with clients, it's a co-design piece, is to combine training, consultancy, and co-design project delivery to create these outcomes and to work on it all together, but specifically to internalize the skill sets and the knowledge around customer centricity, around human-centered design, the other pieces that come into this, so that organizations can own and champion these changes, and they can work on these outputs that you need to deliver, like new reward systems, new KPIs, new playbooks and customer journeys, et cetera. And it doesn't feel like an external organization is just coming and giving you a bunch of recommendations report, like a PwC and Deloitte type scenario. Not to say that they would just come in, drop a recommendations report and then leave, but that does sometimes happen. So for us, the whole idea is to bring these skill sets into the organization and make these changes, if possible, in tandem with each other, so that you can achieve those larger outcomes of becoming a customer-centric organization, which is a big, meaty problem and a tricky one to solve in silo. So we'll talk more about that next time. But for now, I know we only have 6 minutes left, so apologies. We'll jump into questions, and I'll take us off screen share so you can see us again as well.
I might just answer some questions that have already come up, Eric.
Yep, please do.
On the chat. Michelle, really good question. Sometimes knowing where to start is a challenge. What I'll share is we did the transformation at OUA over a 3-year period. And so start somewhere small. And I would say, look at what is the piece that is probably the biggest challenge, creating the most noise, and start there. Where we started was, first, we didn't move to team goals straight away. We just had to improve the individual performance first. And so we just made the performance management framework much tighter initially, and shifted the profile from less than 20% hitting targets to about 40%. And that solved some problems and created new ones, So I'd say, have an experimenting mindset. Eric, in one of the cover slides, you said, that problem statement definition, just define a problem a little clearly and start it, work with some of the key stakeholders that can influence that, define some of the outcomes you want to achieve, and then go from there. And once you build on each stepping stone success, it gets faster. There was another question there around, Michael, I love your question. Not sure what this has to do with customer CX. It's like 101 of managing teams. Thanks for sharing that as well. And it is true, we've not talked about every element of what we did, but I think, though, a big focus is if you manage to support your team to own its customer outcome, I think you'll get a lot of success. So that's my simple way of answering that. But yes, there's lots more to be done, and that's where some of the course material can also help that. Yeah, over to you, Eric.
Yeah, our next webinar will be more focused on more CX strategy, more that org level design piece. That is probably what XI is best known for. But today's session, really, it's great to redesign structures and systems. But if your team level systems and if your employees, frontline staff, aren't bought into that and they don't understand why these changes are being made, they're not going to embrace them. Also, shifting CX strategy, again, it's a hard slog because you do need to get organizational buy-in at various levels. We often, because we do this for a living, but we often see where there's a big education piece that has to occur at exec and board level to make these bigger pieces occur. Because a lot of the time they actually don't understand a lot of the human-centered design, CX, service design strategies, concepts that underlie it. So we actually teach exec level those pieces, design thinking, service design all comes into it. But in reality, the way that we find it works better is to go back down to team level, solve problems there, create customer centricity at that grassroots level. Then the rest of the business sees those wins and they go, whoa, what's going on over there? That's like those dashboards that pop up, NPS goes up, or employee retention goes up, and they go, something's happening over there. That's really interesting. And then suddenly they're much more interested in talking to you about doing the larger CX pieces, bringing in new systems, trying to shift left, all the things that you're trying to do from a CX perspective. We teach CX teams, we help stand up CX teams all the time. And it's really fascinating because there's such a differing level of understanding around the different parts of it. And also what it actually means. CX suffers from the same issues as customer centricity as a term, because people used very different, people describe it using very different ways. So we've got about 2 minutes left. I've just had a question pop up from M.
One quick question there was about eNPS, and Noam, I've replied to you on chat as well. But for everyone, the tool that OUA uses is by a company called CultureAmp, and they have quite a nice engagement survey. And you can do that quarterly, you can do that annually, and that can give you a quite simple measure of eNPS that's useful.
Yeah, we work with them quite a bit as well. They're growing quite rapidly, I think. It's been a good success story with them. Got 1 minute left. So how do you effectively handle any resistance to change? As any improvements to say, wow, maybe met with resistance from people who are set in their ways? So 1 minute and then go.
Yeah. If you don't get resistance to change, then you're not changing enough. And that's where I want to encourage all of us as leaders. We have a role to play there. And like any change process, there'll be some early adopters, there'll be some who'll never get on board. And the middle are people generally willing, but you've got to support them to get there. So I would say, work with your early adopters to change, your champions, and focus on that. The middle folks will come along, and I would say be really clear that who is not going to be part of the future journey, and you might have to act on that and make decisions that are good for the whole system there as well.
Yeah, and just those small wins are so big, and you see a bit of a change, people see the results, and it slowly gains that momentum and a bit of a snowball effect. So thank you very much, everybody. That's our time. So really appreciate you coming on.
I've got a quick last thing, Eric.
Okay.
I just want to give credit to the amazing team at OUA that continues this journey, that is part of this story. And I wish you all the best of success as well in your own journey. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anand, and thank you for your insights. Really, really good from someone who's been in amongst it. So hopefully everyone took quite a bit out of it. We've got another webinar coming up in about a month on the sort of more org structure, CX design. We'll send out an email tomorrow with the recording of this session, and also a few other pieces of information that may be valuable. So if you ever want to have a chat more with either one of us, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again. Bye.